premises. You would have 4 walls around your building. Within those building or buildings, you would have data and you would have assets. You would have maybe dedicated link between offices, sites, and data centers. Around that, you could think is your entire perimeter that you had to defend for threats and control web usage and so on. And you would do so by having security appliances that would usually sit on your network edge. And these would be usually full cabinets of appliances, very expensive technologies that all traffic had to pass through in order that inspection could take place. Moving on slightly, we now have remote working. So we've got users that could be anywhere. So remote working can be home, it can be airport, it can be hotel, etc. And they have to be able to get back into this perimeter in order that they could access company resources. Sometimes as well, in order to fully secure a remote worker's device, they would have to do a process called backhauling or hairpinning, which is where the only way that they could access the internet from their device is they would connect to a VPN, come onto the on-premise internal network, and then go back out via these security appliances in order that any protection and malware scanning, DLP checking, etc. could take place on the traffic, rather than giving them direct access to the internet from their machine and open up themselves to all kinds of threats. We also have to layer on bring your own device. Now, it's a common misconception for bring your own device that it's going to be an employee that is using their own phone while on the company network in the legacy model. The main case for it is usually third parties, contractors, who would come in from maybe a vendor, and they would have to be on your network with their own laptop. And they might be given permission to access certain resources on that network as well. So it's not just an employee using a personal machine, it could be people that you're allowing into your building, onto your premise, to use these network resources. As we move forward, we can see that in order to give these protections to these devices and control what users could do, we also have to layer on agents would be on each of the devices. So you could have multiple agents. The remote worker here could have a VPN agent. They could have an endpoint protection agent. They might have some kind of secure web or DLP agent on there as well. And again, that applies to the assets inside of the estate too. But there are certain devices that you would be unable to put an agent on or be unwilling to, such as maybe it's a server instead of something that a user is using to do their BAU job. It could be a server that's rarely used, but it does have some kind of web access there. It does have files transferred to it that have to be protected. Now, how have things changed? If we look at our perimeter now, as we saw on the previous screen, we have this bubble around it. That is our network edge. It's encompassing all of the sites. We have to also consider where the remote workers are and how we're protecting that entire perimeter. But we have to redefine that perimeter as we move to the cloud. So the first thing of cloud migration, when cloud comes up as a topic of migration, the first thing people tend to think of is moving these on-premise resources into a cloud provider, such as Azure, Google Cloud, or AWS. But that is not essentially cloud migration in a nutshell, because we also have to think of cloud-based technologies that are replacing on-premise solutions, but are not going to be controlled by the company themselves. One of the main ones is going to be something like SharePoint, which encompasses many Microsoft apps under its banner as part of Office 365, OneDrive, etc., where instead of moving your assets into a cloud platform that you control, you're now moving them into a software as a service type setup, and it's no longer your infrastructure, but you don't even have direct access to that infrastructure anymore as you would if it was infrastructure as a service if moving to a cloud platform such as AWS. And we also have to consider cloud apps. So in the old days of the internet, it was all based around websites. Yes, you did get particular cloud apps. I mean, one of the first ever apps I remember using that could essentially be classed as a cloud app is Hotmail, which was the Microsoft The original Microsoft email service that they gave, where you went to a website, you logged into it, and you had the equivalent of an inbox, that is essentially a cloud service that has always been there for a very long time. But we've got so many cloud apps now that you can go to and collaborate on and upload files to, all from within your browser. You don't have to install anything anymore. If we look at the old days of when it came to applications going on to an asset that a user would use within the company would usually have group policies, restrictions. They would need an admin account in order to install an exe file, but they can now do all of that in a browser and have that same kind of app experience purely from a web browser. And with that comes the risks as what can they actually do with these apps? What do we want to allow them to do? So that in a nutshell, to me, is cloud migration. It's changing the mindset of a company going from this old on-premise type setup where you had this well-defined perimeter. Remote working would slightly skew that, but you could still protect the device and the user's activity by having them backhaul back in over a VPN, but thinking in the wider mindset of it's not just moving your assets to a cloud provider, you also have to encompass these apps as well. The apps that could be getting used by your employees without even your knowledge of it. So how does Netskope help with all of this? Well, what we're going to do is we're going to jump over to my little lab area. Bear with me just a moment while I switch the screen. I am on a VM at the moment that is in Azure. I have set it up to resemble what a user would be using. Say we could pretend this is an on-premise device. We could pretend this is a laptop being used by a user in their home. The main thing is it's protected by Netskope, and we're going to walk through the types of technologies. We're just going to layer them up one at a time as to how you can protect against particular use cases for your users who do access the web from anywhere. Now, there's a methodology that Gartner have discussed in the past, I think, 2 years, and they're really going to be rolling it out, which is SASE. So SASE is Secure Access Service Edge, and you have to encompass now, when it comes to that cloud migration mindset, is anywhere, any user, any device, any application, any activity, you're widening the potential for risk because of how your users are now using the internet. So how do we combat those risks by using Netskope? So the first thing is that this is the Netskope tenant. It is a cloud-based, next-generation secure web gateway. The first element we're going to look at is what is a secure web gateway. And we'll just quickly log into this. You can build this into your identity platform. We could use Okta in order to control users on this. We could be enforcing MFA here to secure the tenant itself. Those are key principles when you're using any kind of cloud-based solution. You definitely want to have some kind of single sign-on element to prevent users using multitudes of apps from having to remember multitudes of passwords, because it takes us back to the old days of people having to remember 100 different passwords, all of which have policies that you might not be able to control, where they're maybe changing one password every 30 days, maybe a password isn't changing at all, and then they start writing down passwords, or they start using the same password on multiple apps. You don't want to go down that road. So when you're looking at any cloud technology like this, including Netskope, you want to be thinking about using some kind of identity provider, using some kind of MFA as well to protect these front-end portals. And that is key, because as you look along the favorites, along the top of this Chrome here, most of these are public-facing web portals that can be accessed from anywhere. You can take things further by putting in allowed IP lists and so on, where a user has to be coming from a particular IP to be able to log into this. You can do that with Netskope as well. But does that free up your users if they're having to work from home? Because they'll be on a dynamic IP on their broadband. You will never know what that IP is going to be tomorrow. So these controls have to be well thought out when it comes to securing these apps, because they are just public-facing portals. So I'm just going to log into here. I will just take a quick look at the essentially single pane of glass that you get with Netskope once you're using it. So it's cloud-based tenant. I'm just going to a URL just at the top here. And this is the front end, as we'll call it. The front end is where you're going to be configuring your policies and so on. It's very nice and clean. Netskope has been designed from the ground up for its function. A number of the other secure web gateway type technologies and CASB technologies, they have been what I call Frankenstein, where they were originally on-premise solutions. So they were usually an amalgamation of different technologies merged together into one box or multiple boxes that spoke to each other. Interfaces could be cumbersome, difficult to understand, because just through the nature of how they've been designed. A number of these companies build out their technologies via acquisition, and as a result, you're merging technologies that, you know, they've not been built together for a single purpose. They've just been kind of mashed together, which is why I call them Frankenstein. But for Netskope, it's been designed from day one to deliver what it's doing, so everything is very clean inside of it. Inside of here, we're going to touch upon the visibility aspect, because that is key when it comes to understanding what your users are up to out there. And a number of legacy web solutions will not be able to read the internet. It's just a fact. And that comes from, they cannot do SSL inspection, so they cannot unencrypt data that's in transit, so they'll only ever see that an encrypted packet was sent, and you'll never know what was going on with that traffic, what the user was up to, because the bots can't read it. The other thing is the internet, the language of the internet's changed. Way back in the day, I used to code little pages for GeoCities and so on, and it was very easy to do with HTML. These days, it's all JSON files, it is APIs, it's all these various languages getting used for web traffic. And legacy devices usually can't read it. They're still only going to be able to tell you maybe who the user was and where they were going, but not what they were up to while they were there. And that is a huge element when it comes to controlling what your users can do to prevent the risks and prevent proliferation of data, downloading threats, etc. You have to fully understand what a user is doing when they're using one of these applications, cloud-based application. So first thing we'll look at is we have this CCI here. So this is a Cloud Confidence Index. Back in the day with a secure web gateway, what is a secure web gateway? It is usually the means for controlling what sites you can go to. Okay, so you would have a whitelist, you would have a blacklist, you would have allowed URLs, denied URLs, and you're just controlling what sites people can visit. They would usually be grouped together with categories. We will go through an example of this in a moment. Categories would involve things like gambling, adult content, etc. And you would either allow it or you would deny it, and then you would customize those lists if there were certain things that you wanted to allow that were part of a catch-all policy, etc. But how do you keep tabs on every single website that is created to know whether it's acceptable or not for your users to use? If you wanted to go for a zero trust approach on the internet, zero trust is a huge thing for SASE, so zero trust network access. To do zero trust on the internet, you may as well turn your internet off. You would limit your productivity of your users so much if you just stopped the internet working for them and only allowed them the sanctioned sites or apps that your company use. Think, for example, I work in tech, I could get a problem come my way, and I maybe have to go onto 40 different forums to try and find an answer to this issue and do research and so on. If I had a massive internet block, I would not be able to do my job. So Netskope are very, very much about the trust but verify approach. Definitely deny the things that are going to cause you your real hassle, but don't limit the internet for your users, but definitely get that visibility and control. And one thing that they give you as part of the cloud technology for the CASB technology, is this CCI. And they've done the legwork. So if I go into this application here, we can see a breakdown over what it's like. They score these applications. These applications are scored based upon communication with Netskope. So they do speak to these companies. They do try to find out everything about them, how engaging the company were in answering questions and so on can affect the score. But at the bottom here, we can see the activities a user is allowed to do on that website. So we can see that they can create elements, they can delete elements, they can reboot a resource, etc. And at the bottom, we dig into detail here as to things like legal and privacy. What are the terms and conditions of using this website? And rather than you having to read all the terms and conditions, because no one ever does, I never read the terms and conditions, and I should when I'm using certain websites. but they break it down as to the key issues such as what happens to your data. And that is a huge issue. It opened my eyes when I started moving into this, where when you're using sites like, we'll use an example like WeTransfer. Now, I've not looked at WeTransfer's terms and conditions, but just as an example of a file transfer application, is for some of these sites, when you take a file and you upload it to the site to be distributed to someone, so on WeTransfer, you literally put in an email for who it's to go to. I put in my own email and I get confirmation that the file has been sent, and I upload the file, and then I hit submit, and I maybe tick a box that says, do you agree with the terms and conditions? Inside of those terms and conditions can be a clause that says who owns the data once you hit that submit button. And you can see here, customer owns the data for this particular application, but for some of them, it's actually the company, the application creator that you've just used own that data. So if one of your users had accidentally used one of these file transfer sites and uploaded a file that contained like maybe an idea or say an invention, for example, then they would technically own the designs for that because you've just handed it to them. Now, they usually do it to void themselves of any responsibility should that data get leaked and so on. That they own it, they can do what they want with it. You can't sue them now because it's been leaked out to various people. But it's a very big issue when it comes to intellectual property if your users are actually uploading things to these file transfer sites. So Netskope have done all this groundwork. There are about 38,000 applications in here, I think. Let me just check. The number changes all the time because of the work we're doing. It's actually up to 40,871 applications. Now, some of them will just be listed by name. They're still under research. We can go through them in tags and so on and see like which ones have been identified. Let's check how many haven't been. So there's about 10,000 there that are still under research. I clicked on the grey cloud there to see them, but the other ones you've got that score. So you can quickly see what apps are doing, etc. just by coming into here. You don't need to do that research yourself as long as they're in this CCI. The other side of that is it can also help with cost, because with most of these apps, they'll give a breakdown as to what the cost is. So let's look at, say, Dropbox. It's because I have chosen that. Let me just get off that. And if we go into Dropbox, it'll give me details on the license information here. So you can see that in the top right there, the pricing plan. So as you get visibility of, say you're a major enterprise, you've got a variety of departments and sites. Some people have signed up to Dropbox, some have signed up to maybe OneDrive. You can come in here and do a comparison and see, well, it's actually cheaper if we move to OneDrive as opposed to using Dropbox and so on, and centralize that collaboration tool, that file sharing tool, as opposed to having those multiple usages. So it's very handy for that as well. I'm only going to touch on visibility slightly more. Here we've got user-based anomalies and so on. So we can go and see certain things that, based upon the behavior analytics that are going on behind the scenes of the traffic, we can see things like account sharing is going on. We can see things like people are logging in from geographical locations where it's impossible, such as if I log in from the UK today, and then an hour from now, I log in from America, then there's something wrong here. Netskope would be calling that out. We can see compromised credentials. They actually take, when you see major leaks that happen in the press and so on, they're looking at leaks all the time, and they can cross-check that against your users' email addresses. So a huge issue with cloud apps is people will sign up to them using their corporate credentials. So you've got a problem with that. If they use the same password on there as their company one, then technically they're risking someone being able to breach their account on the corporate side of things because they know their username and password, but they're checking all of these leaks. Well, majority of leaks that come out, they will go through them and they will warn you in here if there have been any compromised credentials spotted. If they see a username has been involved in a leak and it's one of your usernames for your users, then they'll call it out to you. And we get breakdown in malware threats. You can see here I've got this honey badger that I use as part of my test. It tells you where these things are. We can see exactly where they are in cloud storage if it's been integrated that way, etc. And all the activities like quarantining and things when we're looking at DLP. Now, in the scope IT here, we can see a breakdown of all the applications being used by users, the amount they're being used. It's a very good thing to look at the size of data that's been transferred to it when you're working out your sanctioned versus your unsanctioned apps and so on. We can see the breakdown of the sites the users are visiting. We can see all of our users and drill into them and see what they've been up to with their applications and their sites. We can then, as we're building out our policies, we can begin to see the events that people are doing. You can see here that I'm uploading, sharing files and so on. It's breaking it down by activity. Remember, the secure web gateway side of thing is probably only going to tell you that I went to WeTransfer, whereas a next-gen secure web gateway is going to tell you what I was up to on it, particularly with the CASB element. Page events, we're digging in deeper now. We're looking at the exact pages that the user visited. It gives you a whole breakdown of information here as to where they were coming from, what they were, what network they were on, etc., even down to the device that they were using when they were on that page. And we have alerts here. I'm skipping over network events. We do have some network events. I might not have any at the moment because it records up to 90 days. Let me just go to 90 days here. We can integrate Netskope in a particular way to provide zero trust network access. So you could replace a VPN with Netskope if you wanted to. And the network events would show up here. There's going to be quite a few of them for me testing my RDP connection. This is where this has been a secure connection to an on-premise. Think an on-premise server, and I can connect to it, but it's actually Netskope handling the communication, which means I don't need an additional VPN on this box for that to happen. It's Netskope is handling that. And we've got alerts. So once I've got my policies created, we can now see the breaches of these policies. So we've got particular alerts here when I've been breaking the rules or I've been trying to do something I shouldn't be allowed to do. So you can see that I'm getting a number of blocks here on activity that I'm trying to do. So that's like the visibility side of it is key. And when you're looking at one of these solutions, the ideal way to see what your users are up to is get a tenant like this. Netskope can provide test tenants, have your users use it, or in the back end here, we have this thing called Risk Insights, where we can take a log file from, for example, a Blue Coat firewall, and we could upload it to Netskope. And as long as we've got a parsing right and so on, and that our columns are okay in our log, if it's a CSV, etc., then Netskope will parse that information into that same format that you saw on the front screen as to what the users are up to, where they're going, etc. It will try and present that information to you in the exact same format as the Netskope logs we looked at. So you don't even need clients on machines, you just need to get the log file into here. And you can do that automatically as well. So there's a tool called a secure forwarder that you can put on premise or behind your firewall, and you can send your firewall log directly to that secure forwarder, and it will send it to Netskope, and then Netskope will do that automatically for you. So you're not just seeing the users that you're aware of, that you're counting as an employee using a Netskope, say a device with a Netskope client on it. You're actually looking at all activity. And that can be key as well when we're talking about maybe you've got a guest Wi-Fi and that you allow anyone to come in and connect to your guest Wi-Fi. You can still see exactly what's going on that type of traffic and put limitations in if you need to for any kind of security issue that might come from that guest Wi-Fi. You can see all activity across your estate. And with the level of detail, as you've seen where it's breaking it down upon activity, as well as the place where the user's going, we can break down. You can even see here it's giving me a breakdown of the specific file that was used in this case that hit the block. That visibility is key when you're planning this out, when you're looking at your policies and so on. Most people would be moving from a legacy secure web gateway to a next-gen secure web gateway. The web side of it is just a small part. You can take all your policies that you have right now for your allow list and your blacklist, and you could port them into this quite easily. But you need to think of that extra element of all the activity, all the types of things users can be doing, and the controls that you can have when it comes to making your policies. So I'm just going to very quickly look at policies at the moment, and you can see that they're quite easy to read, quite easy to set up. If I take this top one here, I have a naming convention here just saying I use it for a demo. It's a DLP policy. It's for the application Salesforce. If it's a GDPR trigger, then we're going to block. And the activity is if the user uploads, posts, or tries to send a file that contains GDPR information, then it's going to be blocked, as long as Netskope's going to catch it, such as via use of the client here. Now, I'm just going to go into DLP for a moment. Out of the box with it, you get all these templates that you can use. You don't need to sit and make your own dictionary rule as to what is defined as GDPR. Netskope give you all of that out of the box, and they split it down. It covers like so many countries in here, like Australia, USA, Canada, etc. And you can also customize all of these to meet your rules. So one use case that I saw recently was white is a GDPR identifier for race, but the company had white paint, they had white bread, they had white wine, and they were triggering false positives. But you can customize these rules so that white paint, and you can do it within limitations such as if white appears within 100 characters of wine, then it'll class it as ignore. That's not going to be a GDPR rule. Only if it's maybe got a full name in there and a date of birth, you'd maybe be looking at the racial identifier. You can customize all of this to stop you getting the false positives as well. And I mentioned at the start about visibility with the legacy devices not being able to look at HTTPS traffic or SSL traffic. It can decrypt SSL. It can get that full visibility of encrypted traffic out of the box. So what we'll do is we'll just go through a couple of examples here. I'm just going to open up a brand new window here. And let's look at the secure web gateway side of things first. So secure web gateway usually offers some level of threat protection, usually controls what people can visit based upon a category. We'll look at gambling. So let's go to Ladbrokes. I try and go to Ladbrokes. I have a Netskope client running on this machine. This client is sending my traffic. I have what we'll call a steering configuration that is dictating what traffic from this device is to be sent to the Netskope tenant for checking and which is to be bypassed. And that's important because there's certain things that you wouldn't want to go to the Netskope tenant, such as if I was to log into my bank right now, would I want that to pass through a Netskope tenant, all my traffic from logging into my bank? No, I wouldn't. So you probably put a bypass in to say, if it's going to be a banking website, don't send it through the tenant. That's your call to make based upon your business, but you can bypass is the important thing. But for this, we're passing all web traffic. And because I've tried to go to a gambling site, I have a secure web policy saying that if a user ever tries to go to a gambling site, block it, don't allow them to go. And I get this custom message. So every message in Netskope allows you to customize it. And you can see that I'm telling the users here, you've tried to go to a gambling site, you're not allowed. However, let's say William Hill are a client of ours and we want to go to their website, I can tell the user that you're not allowed to go to this gambling site, but you are allowed to go to William Hill. And if I now go to William Hill, it works. And that is just simple secure web gateway. That is where you've got this allow list, you've got a category-based rule blocking all gambling, but then you've put an exception in, be it a direct URL or an address, an IP, whatever you want. If it matches that rule, it's going to allow it. Everything else is going to get blocked. And it's purely based upon category, apart from my exception, which is this specific site. But Netskope, a common way to bypass these things is you could use something like Google Translate. And because it's no longer going to ladbrokes.com, it's going to translate.google.com here, you can sometimes get round secure web gateway rules by masking and loading the web page embedded in a web page. But as you can see, Netskope catches it. So Netskope is able to read that I'm trying to bypass the Netskope tenant at the moment, and it's blocked me again trying to go to Ladbrokes. It's smart enough to be able to read and know what the user's up to if they're trying to bypass it. Now, I'm going to go to Box now. In fact, let's go to WeTransfer first because it's a very quick demo for this. Before we start moving into the CASB side, which I'm going to go into detail of, we'll look at the API integration side, which we're going to go into detail. This is us moving into the CASB. So a CASB is a cloud access security broker or service broker, depending on who you speak to. And this is where you're now blocking activity. You're now looking at limiting access to websites that are mainly app orientated. You're looking to control what a user can do in a web page or site or app, even if you don't own that. So you've got no way, I've got no way of integrating with WeTransfer. I don't work for WeTransfer. I've got no business relationship with WeTransfer. I can't touch their back end. All I get is this page. That's what I'm allowed. Most users will see this page and that's it. But I want to control the activity on this page. And that's where you're now moving into the cloud aspect of web security. So as I said before, with WeTransfer, I can take a file. We're going to just take this, let's just take this WeTransfer.txt. I've got that there because it's nice and small. I put in an email address. So I'm on a Mac and my keys change when I'm RDP into Windows. I'll just take that. I don't think I've copied there because again, I'm on a Mac. And we can see we've got the option to transfer. Now you can see that I don't get any kinds of terms and conditions here. I'm sure that up in help or company and so on, I'm not even asked to tick anything before I try and send this file, but we'll try and transfer it. And you can see that I'm blocked. I'm not allowed to do it. I cannot upload to this, but I can download. And if we go back to our policies here, under real-time protection, let's find the WeTransfer one. It's probably right down the very bottom because it's one of the first ones I've done. You can see that this policy for WeTransfer, it's using the application WeTransfer. It knows what WeTransfer is because it exists in the CCI. I can also create custom applications. So if you do find an application that's maybe only you use it, it's custom, it's in-house, could be anything, that the CCI is never going to know what it is. You can define it yourself by defining things like the domain, etc. Something to identify what that service is. You can make your own, but because WeTransfer is available out of the box in Netskope, I've configured this policy that's only if you trigger one of these activities, upload and share. And that's important because you might not want to be sending files out over WeTransfer. You don't want that to happen because it's risky, but one of your clients might rely on it and they have to send you files via WeTransfer. So if someone was to send me a link right now via WeTransfer, I can still download the file. I just can't send one back to them, but I can get it. I can get it from them. And if we go back to, I shouldn't have went away from there. Let's try again. Sometimes it caches what I'm doing on the site itself. So we'll try that transfer again. Here, you can see that I've customized this alert to not just say to the user, you're not allowed to do this, you shouldn't be doing this, because all they'll do is they'll instantly go and find another service like Dropbox or some other possibly higher risk cloud storage application. They will always try to find a way around it. I do it, everyone does it. You'll say, oh, I'm not allowed to use this, I'll go and find another. And my policy only relates to WeTransfer, so Dropbox might work for them, but I still don't want them to be using this. But I'm telling them here, I'm educating the user, saying, don't use WeTransfer, use Office 365, because maybe that's the app that we pay for as a company, and I'm giving them a link to the instructions straight from Microsoft here as to how to do it. So the user should now go to Office 365, put their file into like OneDrive, and they can link an external user to that file. They don't have to use WeTransfer. And now it's controlled because we're keeping it on the corporate instance of the application, a cloud storage application, as opposed to trusting these. And again, we've configured this to be WeTransfer, but we can do it via category as well. So I could block every single thing that's identified as cloud storage by Netskope. I could do it for all of them as a blanket policy, as opposed to just focusing on an individual site. Just to give you that idea of the control you can get, doing it on a specific application or a category-based list of these applications. And then we've got that granular control that we can provide, where I'm only blocking upload and share. So as opposed to blocking this entire site where all they'll see is access denied, we only block the upload element and we educate the user as to why we've done it. So as to allow them to go instantly to where they should be doing it, educating them at source, as opposed to them going and finding some other way to do it. So I'm just going to close off my browser here. I close my browser after every single demonstration because some authentication methods get cached and so on. So I'm just going to keep closing and reopening my browser. Let's look at, say, Gmail. So we'll go to Gmail, common web-based application. We use it ourselves at Somerford. I'm going to compose an email. And there's two things I'm going to do here. Oh, that was cached. I'm going to try and send malware to myself. So I've got a little malware file here. I've taken straight from iCar. And you can see it's not going to allow me to add that as an attachment. It's this traffic, me trying to attach this file to this email, has went via the tenant. and the tenant has discovered that it's a malware file, and it stops me from attaching it to the email. If I say OK on this, you can see it looks like it's still there. I'll just put file in the subject box here. It looks like it's still there, but hit send, and you can see the attachment's gone. It's not going to allow me to send malware, but it's also not going to allow me to download malware. If I had an email here that had malware, all malware is going to be blocked the minute that I try to download it, because it's catching that in flight. It doesn't have to hit the machine. Usually you would have maybe an endpoint protection thing on here that I would download it and then it would be scanned. It's never going to hit my device because it's still in flight. It's still in the web, essentially. And because that, when I download the attachment, it's going to go via the tenant's going to catch it. It's not going to allow me. But we can also do this with GDPR as well, because we have the DLP element. So most secure web gateways will probably offer some level of threat protection. It can't do it for everything, but they'll offer some level of threat protection. But next gen secure web gateway, you're getting that full threat protection, and it can come at various levels as well. But then we've got the idea of DLP. So malware is a good demonstration for this, but we want to stop a file. Now I can't remember what the policy is for this, so let's find out. And I'll go look, because I'm going to do that in a moment anyway. So I'll do file, and I'm going to try and upload, say, this GDPR doc. Or should we do, in fact, I will check the policy. Let me see whether it's file-based or image-based. So we're looking for Gmail here. We've got a GDPR policy, and it looks to be just a standard GDPR policy. So that's fine. So let me just come back to my Gmail, and I'll upload this GDPR document here. As you can see, that it's not going to allow me to send that email because I'm trying to send sensitive data over email, and I shouldn't be doing that as part of our company policy. It's going to stop me from doing this. I can't do it. So we've got the malware is getting detected, it's a threat, but we've also got the GDPR as well, and those rules again can be changed. You could make this be anything. It doesn't have to be GDPR. You could put confidential as a flag, so you can't send confidential information. If you've got proprietary documents that say things in them, maybe architect plans, then create a rule for architect plan, something that's going to identify that file, and it will not be allowed to be sent. And this applies to any cloud app that has that sharing ability, so upload, share, post, etc. You could create that rule for that activity, have the file scanned. It also works, which we'll come to, works for images as well, depending on the level of DLP that you've got in Netskope, that it can read a picture. So it's the equivalent of you using a scanner like OCR, where it pieces together and reads text and so on. It can do that with images. So we're looking mainly at cloud apps, and we're mainly looking at the use of the client here. One last little demonstration we can do on this. I'm conscious of time, but one last little demonstration we could do. Let's go for Office 365. I don't think I'll need cache for that, but let's find out. I'm using Office 365. I said before about it's common for people that if they're asked to sign up for a service and they're using a corporate device, they'll probably use a corporate email. We don't want that to happen for apps that we don't allow. So I'm just going to choose my Gmail account to log into Office 365. I've got the password right for this. And we can see that that's worked. So I can log into Office 365 fine using that Gmail account that I use for my demos. I'll just let us be signed out of this. I'll hit sign in again. I'm going to choose use another account rather than use a cached one, and I'll type my corporate email into here. And I'll choose personal account. And we're blocked. And that's because for this particular policy for Office 365, we have what's called a constraint. So we're no longer looking at the activity the user is doing. Well, we technically are, which I'll come to, but we're looking at the actual data the user is using as part of a form post. So your authentication method is usually going to be a form post. And I've put a constraint on this to say no one should ever log into this application using that corporate email. I don't want them to ever use their corporate identity on this site because it's not one that our company uses. So anyone can sign up for Office 365. We can block that and stop them registering. We can stop them logging into it if they're not using a particular email address or suffix, an email suffix like gmail.com, or as you saw, Somerford Associates there. We can control that element as well. And that is from, where's my Office 365 policy? Oh, we've got it here, it's Microsoft Live. So we have it as a login attempt here, but with a constraint. And it's to say, only if it's a Gmail account can I log into this application. Any other account, you're not allowed to do it. Now, you can turn that on its head and you can prevent phishing with this. Because if I know that the Netskope tenant, oh, don't want to move that. If I know the Netskope tenant is going to detect a legitimate Microsoft Live Suite application, web page, then if I block everything else, the user, if you sent them a phishing link and it looked like Office 365, as phishing attempts tend to do, and they absent-mindedly tried to log into it with their corporate details, it would be blocked because it's not the real one. So we've got it where we can stop people registering for things with their corporate identity. We've got it where we can stop them logging into things, even with their personal details. So you might want to block that. How would you steal data from a company? You'd usually put in a USB stick and you put all your files in the USB stick, take that out of your work laptop, you've now stolen all the data. If you block the ability to move things to a USB stick, how would they steal that data? Probably register for Dropbox and upload all the stuff to Dropbox. Anyone could sign up for Google Drive, so they just upload all the stuff to Google Drive. You might be using a corporate instance of Google Drive and they've got a personal one, and they could just download, upload, etc. But you could stop them using their personal details on apps like this using these constraints. And then we've got the phishing element as well. If we turned it completely on its head, we can now decide which apps the users can use their corporate ID on. And if it isn't one of them, it's going to be blocked. So therefore, they can never be phished unless they handed out their username and password. They would never be able to fill in a form and post that data with that corporate information if you've created these types of constraints in here. And these constraints could be a number of things. You can set things down to the device type that they're coming in from, where I can classify this device as managed. If I look at the configuration here, you can see that this is an unmanaged device, but I can tell Netskope how to identify that this device is a managed device, meaning it's one of our company devices. I can do it via registry entries, domain membership, etc. That if it detects that they're using a personal device, it could block everything because they're not coming from a sanctioned device. So you can do all kind of granular controls with this, but these constraints and these like activities that you can block at the granular level are key to stopping that phishing, stopping people proliferation of data, etc. So where shall we go now? Let's take a look at Box. So we've looked at using the client, but let's think of what if we don't have the client. So let's turn off our client. Remember, cloud applications, usually a public-facing portal with a username and password box. You might not have MFA on it, you might not have identity management. So all that's stopping someone from logging into that public-facing portal is going to be a username and password. They might have been phished, they might have written it down, someone's looked over their shoulder while they're typing something in, so somebody has got their username and password, and now they're going to log into your corporate instance of an application because they know the username and password, and you don't know if that's a user or not. So open up a new window, let's go into Box. With particular applications, not all, but with particular applications, you can integrate Netskope into the back end of the application as well. So if I log into this, again, I have no client running here. So this is just me coming in here as any user. Remember the SASE model, any user, any device, any app, anywhere, etc. So I'm logging into this, and I'm a nefarious actor. So I'm looking to do damage to this business. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to upload malware. So let's put malware on here, and we're going to call it something it's got to be called malware.docx, right? But we'll call it something like download me, install me, etc. Users use this. There's about 40 users maybe have access to this bucket. They will download that, they will install it, and now that malware is inside the company. So it could be a crypto locker or something like that, is now inside the company. I get no blocks. Box isn't doing a virus scan on this. The client is not running on this particular device, and I have now been able to move malware inside this corporate application, corporate instance of Box. We now have malware sitting there that can be downloaded by anyone that also has access to this bucket. Just refresh this page. I'll give that another couple of moments. But behind the scenes, we've integrated Box into Netskope, and that is called API integration. Now, because it's API, it's not real time, which is why I'm refreshing the screen here, waiting on it. We're relying on Box at the moment to acknowledge that this file now exists here. Once it does, a call will be made to Netskope, and Netskope takes action, and it's already done it. You can see here, I uploaded a docx file. It was a Word document that I uploaded here, but it is now a .text file because it's now what's called a tombstone file. And a tombstone file is to warn the user so that they don't just upload the same file again thinking it's been deleted. We could set it to just delete the file. We could send it to being quarantined via some kind of application like CrowdStrike, if Netskope integrates with it. But we've left a little file behind, a little text file. We've taken that file away and we've moved it to a quarantine folder. And we're saying, you uploaded this file, it contained malware, speak to me, and let's discuss it. Let's work out, was it malware, was it not, etc. But we've stopped that threat in its tracks purely from the application because Netskope is currently integrated with this application. I've got no client running, no detection, no checking going on of that malware. But once it appeared in this instance, action was taken by Netskope to stop that threat in its tracks. On the other side of it, if I wanted to steal information from the company, so again, I'm a nefarious actor that has got access to this corporate instance of Box, I'm going to try and steal this file. Where is download? Oh, sorry. I'm supposed to have the client on for this one. Give me a moment. I'll enable the client. So we have a policy here that's going to block me downloading that. So ignore all the fact I'm a nefarious actor anymore. I'm now on a client machine. I just need my client to register. It's still firing up. There we go. Client is now on. This was to show you the image. Sorry, this was to show you the actual image element of it, where you can see that even though this is a picture, so it's a fake ID card, it could read that and pick out the GDPR information. It could see that that's an ID card, and I've got a policy for that. So on the nefarious actor side, I cannot upload malware to this. On the DLP side, when you've got API integration, the DLP side of things is checking these files as well. So if I've got a DLP checker on here configured with Box, it would tell me this file exists behind the scenes in the Netskope tenant. It could create an alert to say, you have got DLP elements across this Box account, it's here, and then you can take action on it. Because all day long, when you've got these cloud applications, people can be uploading absolutely anything to them, and you end up with this mess of data, especially when you've got joiners, movers, leavers. It's not like a Windows file system where you can go in and you can browse around it as an admin and so on. You can end up with hundreds upon files against a user account. You don't know what's there. You don't know what's been shared with people. You don't know what's public. Someone could accidentally publicly link this entire directory. But Netskope's got controls for that. It can resolve those visibility issues, particularly in Office 365 as an example. If somebody's shared a number of files, it can alert on all the GDPR that's in that Office 365 instance in OneDrive, and then it could alert on visibility and fix visibility issues and so on. So coming away from Box, just one last example, and then we'll wrap up because I'm conscious of the time. I'm going to turn off my client again, and for this one, I'm going to close my browser, and we're going to come back and we'll open up Chrome, and we're going to go to Salesforce here. So again, we've integrated this application with Netskope. You can see here that this is my identity provider. So this is going to be taking me to Okta to authenticate. It's then going to allow me to log in, but I have absolutely no client installed. And this was what I was trying to show you with the GDPR, but this is where you can see it for real. So Netskope demonstration, I will just quickly log into this. Again, no client running at the moment, so I've got unfiltered web access here. And I'm now into this Salesforce instance. Now I am going to try and share something that I shouldn't be, even though I've not got the client running. So the demonstration I tried to do with the ID card, we're going to see it for real here. And I'll try and upload a malware file to this. That is not Salesforce blocking that there. That is Netskope blocking it. And this is called reverse proxy. Here, in the URL for Salesforce, that our proxy.ghostscope.com, if we go back to our tenant, you can see that the Netskope domain is ghostscope.com. So what we're essentially doing here is, even though I've got no client running on this machine, so this could be a personal device, it could be a nefarious actor, it could be any type of device that's logging into this public-facing cloud portal, you can still implement controls on the application if it can be integrated into Netskope. So I cannot proliferate malware, I cannot share sensitive information, I cannot download it. It's all being controlled by Netskope because we're piggybacking the traffic to Salesforce directly through the tenant. So I don't need the client anymore on the machine. My traffic is still going via the tenant because it's now being passed through via this reverse proxy. Now, can only work with certain applications. You do need the integration, such as with Okta, etc., for identity. But here, we've got the controls for cloud, even though no client is running. The ideal way for anyone to use Netskope is definitely the client with the level of protection, granular control you get. But when you've got that bring your own device element, if somebody was to log into one of these apps with their own personal device, then Netskope is actually going to be able to control it if Netskope can integrate with the application in this way. If we just quickly jump back to our events, everything that I've done here, you can see here's this malware file has been caught as an upload. You'll eventually, it takes a couple of minutes, but you'll eventually see what action was taken with that malware file, where it went, etc., what happened. You can see the blocks that are happening to me, all different types of things. You can see there's a malware.txt there as well from earlier today. So you'll get full visibility of what your users are up to when their traffic is going through this client, and you can do controls even when the client isn't installed, no matter where the user is coming from. And it comes back to, it's any application, anywhere, any device, any activity, etc., are the things you need to focus on for cloud security, particularly when looking at that SASE model. I'm just going to jump back to my slide deck now, if I can. So overall, what we looked at today, we've got our next-gen secure web gateway. We have the DLP element, the CASB element, the cloud access element, and we've got the secure web gateway there. It does more, such as I said, it can replace a VPN, give you the zero trust network access, which we're not going to look at. We're just looking at the web and cloud app elements today. Various other things that it does, it's got email integration that is just recently coming out. Various backend things, like you can use IPsec tunneling, GRE tunneling, etc., which we never went into. There's a whole swathe of things that the Netskope tenant solution can give you overall that to me, it's a phenomenal piece of kit. I've never seen anything like it. Let me see if I can just go full screen on this. And that's much better. So with us, with Somerford and Netskope, we align with best of breed technologies. So we don't sell more than one type of technology usually. So with Netskope, we don't have any other secure web gateways on our books that we sell to people. We go with what we think are the best, and Netskope has one of the best. They're the top right of the CASB Gartner quadrant. They're right up the top right there. There is no next gen secure web gateway Gartner quadrant, so it's split between secure web gateway and CASB, and they're the top right of CASB. And when we look at the Gartner, I think they will bring out a next gen secure web gateway, and it'll be very interesting to see where they end up. We're fully qualified. I mean, I've invited to Netskope Prime, which is invite only by Netskope when you're a certain level of knowledge of the Netskope tenant and so on. We've got an in-house support desk that can help with things first time, rather than you always have to go to the vendor for solutions. We'll help you. If you send us an email, we'll take you through it. And we give things like the complimentary workshops and so on to anyone that wants to attend if they want to see them.